So today we're going to be debunking the black swan. By the time that this video is finished, if you understand it and you follow it from start to finish, you will understand the black swan argument, and you will understand that it is nothing more than seeing refraction over the curvature of the Earth. Now, you don't have to take my word for it. You can just watch the presentation and make your own mind up yourself, because ultimately this is for the flat earthers out there. If you're a flat earther and you believe in the black swan argument, if you are being hoodwinked into believing that that is the be all and end all of your arguments, then you need to watch this video, because I'm going to walk you through it step by step as an ex-flat earther myself, show you my credentials, what I did in the flat earth community, and where my research finally took me. So over the next 40 minutes or so, I am going to try and prove to you that there is curvature to be seen here on Earth, that the black swan argument is dead in the water, but you need to stay to the end of the video to fully understand it. If you don't understand it, go back and listen to it again, because I am walking you through it step by step. So Nathan and the flat earthers like to use the modus tollens argument, if P then Q. I'm just going to let you listen to what Nathan has to say about this.
And when I say black swan, because you say I've got evidence to prove that if the Earth was a sphere, radius 3959, as we assert when we assume R, that's debunked by the black swan, then the horizon distance for boats to go over, by way of begging the question fallacy, could be no more than 1.2 times the square root of the observer's height in feet, as per the begging the question, proof of nothing, perspective hijacking Earth curve calculator that Katz and Ranty used to ask flat earthers why how many feet and inches are missing.
Now, in his argument, he uses 1.22. Now, that isn't including standard refraction. So already he is just assuming a geometric globe without an atmosphere. But we all know we have an atmosphere. Now then, in a criminal court, if you have committed a crime, you still have to go through the actus rea and mens rea. You can still have mitigating circumstances that may explain what actually happened and why a crime was committed that normally would not have been committed. And in the same respect, the globe also has mitigating circumstances for the black swan photography, where the horizon is beyond the platforms. It's just that Nathan likes to see things in black and white because it suits his narrative. There's no room for any mitigating circumstances, but that isn't a true reflection of the globe argument. The globe argument has standard refraction as an explanation. The hard part is trying to prove that you can have standard refraction around a globe. And in today's video, I am going to conclusively 100% prove to you that standard refraction does happen around a globe, and that will debunk the black swan argument. So let's give you an idea of who I am so that you know who you're talking to. And this channel here called Brandon's used to be my channel. It had more subscribers than it currently does, and the work that you're seeing right here on screen, which is the videos from the earliest time, is videos that I produced and put out. Now then, I also want to say that this was not my original channel. I had a channel before that, and some of these videos, early videos here, are basically a copy of that. But for the most part, most of my work was uploaded onto this channel, and as you can see, some of these started over 3 years ago, but my journey started around 5 years ago. So that's who I am. And I go by the name of Ranty on YouTube. And my new channel is called flerf, which is a globe channel. So I now believe that the Earth is a globe. But at the time when I was doing this research, I believed that the Earth was flat. Now, what I've done is I've just chosen a selection of videos, and they're all lined up at the top here. And I'm just going to go quickly through these because I want you to understand that there are some people currently in the flat earth community who are trying to discredit me, and they are trying to do it for a number of reasons, primarily because they want to keep the belief open that the Earth is indeed flat. But I want to show you the work that I was doing, and I want to just talk briefly about just a small selection of the videos that I did, and then you'll understand where I'm coming from. So this video was called Measured 18.1 Miles. Here I am actually down at the beach with my tape measure out, measuring the exact heights of all known features local to me where I was doing my filming. This particular shot here is of a step where I am measuring it down to exactly 6 inches so that I knew exactly how many steps I'd climbed. I would know exactly how many inches I was above the actual water at the time. I talk about looming, mirroring, and the angle. This is back on the 4th of July 2018, long before Nathan Oakley started talking about the limited angle. If you want to know where that originated from, it was from me. When I was a flat earther, I would take imagery like this and see that half of these wind turbines are missing in the background, clearly below the horizon. And I would be focusing on the line through the center of these hubs and completely ignoring the fact that these turbines in the background are sunken behind the horizon. 2-foot swell envelops all of Barrow, so I start talking about the swell effect here of water. Perspective versus curvature. Now then, back in the 11th of June 2018, I was talking about perspective long before Flatzoid started talking about it. But I wasn't just saying perspective. I was going into great detail about what I thought may be happening and actually putting these things to the test. I wasn't doing a Flatzoid. I was literally understanding perspective inside and out. Perspective versus curvature, the vanishing zone puzzle. And indeed, it was a puzzle. These boats did appear to go into a vanishing zone of the inferior mirage. It's just air, right? Air at the horizons. And it was. This boat is not going through waves, it's going through air. And it appears that it looks like it's going through the waves, but it's not. And you can see these fake waves, I would call them. And clearly this is evidence of refraction, right? The water's being refracted up. Theodolite proof of Earth curvature assumptions debunked. This is where I start going on about pick your horizon line. As you zoom in and I put there's a line going through here, I say, where is the horizon? So there's current argument from people like Nathan Oakley, who are talking about the sextant and trying to say that you can't prove it because you can't determine where the horizon is. That information and that thought first crossed my mind back in March 2018 when I was presenting this kind of stuff on Nathan Oakley's show. Elevation drops measuring the amount of mirroring. This is where I would go up and down the steps of Blackpool to document how much of the mirroring effect hidden the buildings of Barrow in the distance, and you can clearly see the inferior mirage blocking it there. This is me down at the beach digging a hole in the sand to actually see the buildings of Barrow far away in the distance at 18 miles away. So here I am again down at the beach. It's titled Thanks Sly Sparkane, Mirrorball and All Cheers. And what I'm actually doing here again is I'm getting my tape measure out and trying to be as scientific as I possibly could with all my calculations and measurements. So I knew exactly to within, let's say, half a foot. There is a bit of margin for error with all of these things. But of course, I was trying to do it as best as I could. A new location where I can really smash the ball. Now, in this particular occasion, we actually see half of the buildings of Barrow missing by water, but this isn't actually the curvature of Earth. This is just the tidal bore that happens in this location, which at this time I was unaware of. And I got a lot of stick for this, but I did actually find the information. Eventually, I was able to determine that from that exact spot, that's where the tidal bore would be seen at its most prevalent, which artificially increases the height of the water. Elevation comparison on a boat. Again, I go up and down and I try to figure out what's going on. Atmosphere, not curvature, optical effects over water. And of course, if you followed my channel back then, this was all I was talking about, the optical effects over water. no bulge, no drop, no curve, flat water. And it's interesting that I title it Flat Water Equals Flat Earth, because that was my mantra. That's what I believed in. If the water was flat, we have a flat Earth. And from this particular time, I'd driven all the way around to Barrow-in-Furness to film Blackpool. Here's another observation. Beautiful, beautiful observation. 18.7 miles away and off the beach. And basically, these buildings should not be seen, if you believe the geometric size of the globe, without taking refraction into account at all. And I wasn't taking refraction into account back then. And clearly, when I see an observation like this, which shows these buildings here, which should not be seen on the geometric globe, I was punting this as a flat Earth proof, and so was everybody else at the time, punting it as a flat Earth proof. My observations did the rounds. Talk about compression. Here we go to the go-to compression video. No boats went over the curve. When this was back in September of 2018, long before people like Flatsoid and Nathan Oakley started even talking about compression. I was the guy that was doing this stuff. I was the one putting the evidence out for this and understanding it implicitly. Compelling evidence that the inferior mirages hide the flat Earth. Obviously, we know inferior mirages do hide things. This was a point of contention for the longest time until I was able to determine that it did do, and finally even the globe earthers agreed that it did. So that was definitely a win for me going forward anyway, at least, because it did prove the inferior mirage hide thing. Test at the track. Here I actually blagged my way to go down onto the track and perform some tests down at the beach, and I'd take some objects down there, and I'm trying to check for the limited angle, because Nathan Oakley had mentioned this limited angle, and I wanted to test the idea of the limited angle. Wasn't able to prove it. Again, inferior mirage and etc., without inferior mirage. So when out of an inferior mirage, here we see beautiful, what I would say is shore-to-shore observations, and it is. And half of this hill should be hidden to Earth curvature if you believe in the geometric measurements for the globe. But this was research that I was doing. This was evidence that I was putting out to show that we live on a flat plane. I was wrong, but that's beside the point. The point was I was doing the legwork for this. Aspect ratio. So I start talking about aspect ratio of things. Moving on, we start talking about gas pressure without a container. Challenge, how can we have air pressure in an open system? This is back in November of 2018, long before the gas pressure without a container argument came about. Why? Because I was the one thinking of these things. It was me that was putting this information out. Theodolites can be used to determine R, question marks. That's in February of 2019. And I'm talking about R, question mark. I wonder where that came from. I wonder how R came about. Maybe it came about because it was me that was talking about it and trying to say that the theodolites can't be used to determine R because the horizon is always moving up and down. So this whole idea, everything that Nathan Oakley's punting right now about optics, everything that people like Flatsoid are putting out about optics, I've been there, I've done it, and I've worn the t-shirt. And I actually did the proper research. I measured everything. I was incredibly detailed about everything that I did. I may have been wrong, and I wasn't seeing what I should have seen, but all I was interested in was if we have flat water, we live on a flat plane. So that's who I was, and that's who I still am, and I still know all of this stuff. And I'm going to explain to you today why the black swan image is just refraction, and I'm going to prove it to you. Now then, Kevin Jackson took an image of Blackpool from this location down here. This is where he took his observation from. I've titled it point number 1. And we're going to put a little line in here so that you can follow the line of sight to this. And from point 1, looking over at point 2, which is where Blackpool Tower is, here's point 2. There's Blackpool Tower right here. There we go. There you can see Blackpool Tower. And so from point 1 to point 2, and then following that line through there, we end up with the mountains in the background, which I've titled point 3. Now then, there's a reason that I've done this, and that's to show you that the location where I filmed in is essentially the same area of where Kevin Jackson actually took this photograph. Right, so I'm going to save this image here, and I'm going to show you where I would be taking my observations from. So from essentially this point here, all the way up to this point here, this coastline, this is where I would take my photography from. So I'm going to save that there. And the majority of my photography was taken from anchor zone, which is roughly around about here. And I was taking it from most of the time down on the beach, around about here. And I would be looking across this area of water here. And we'd be looking at things like the buildings of Barrow over here at Devonshire Dock Hall. We'd be looking at the lighthouse down here at Walney. We'd be looking at the R&L lifeboat station down here. And I would be following it along the coastline here. So my photography spanned this area here. Right. So as long as you understand that where Kevin Jackson took his photography from, between point 2 and point 3 here, what we're going to analyze in a minute, between point 2 and point 3, that was where I did my photography down here. So based upon that, and knowing that from these locations down here, from essentially 18 miles away, looking over here to Devonshire Dock Hall, I was seeing far further than I should on a geometric globe. I was actually seeing far further than I should on a refracted globe as well. And in my opinion back then, and in a lot of flat earthers' opinion too, we were seeing just beautiful shore-to-shore observations with flat water. Now, if I can demonstrate to you that from point 2 to point 3 is dropped, would that change your mind about believing that the photography I took was flat water? Well, if you can answer truthfully, you would obviously turn around and say yes. And I think that's the correct way to go, because it is the correct way to go. If I can demonstrate that Kevin Jackson's photography and other photography taken from this place, when viewing Blackpool Tower and the mountains in the distance, if I can determine that between point 2 here and point 3 is dropped, if I can determine that, then that will answer my question about when I went down to the beach and saw this photography and saw shore to shore, in my opinion, over flat water. It will answer that question for me. Did I actually see shore to shore because it was flat? Or did I see shore to shore because actually the surface was curved, but I was seeing refraction? See, there's only two explanations. That's the only two explanations it can be. Either the water is flat, or either the water is curved, and I was seeing those buildings around the curvature of Earth. And how do you determine that? Well, you try and determine whether or not between point 2 here, Blackpool Tower, and point 3, the mountains here, you need to determine what's going on there. If it's flat, you'll be able to determine it, and you'll know that this area here was flat water. And if you see drop on these mountains in the distance in relation to Blackpool Tower, then you will know that this area here is actually curved, and I was actually filming refraction. Okay, so this is the image of Blackpool and the mountains behind. So we have point 1, which is the observer. We have point 2 over here, which is Blackpool Tower. And we have point 3 over here, which is the mountains. Now then, I've already showed you where my location was, where I did my filming from. And all we need to now determine is between point 2 and point 3, whether or not in relation to Blackpool Tower, there is either a flat plane to the mountains or whether or not the mountains are dropped. And that will answer the question as to whether I was seeing refraction or not down at the beach at Anchor's Home. So in order to determine what I would class as eye level, we need to look at the big wheel, which is situated on Central Pier. Here's an image of the big wheel on Central Pier. Let me scroll in a little so that you can see it a little bit better. And you can see that the water goes right underneath the big wheel, right? So when the tide's coming in, the tide will go underneath the big wheel, and it is around about 25 feet or so from the pier to the water beneath. That is about the height of it. Now then, we can see the big wheel in this photography from Kevin Jackson. Here's the big wheel, here's the buckets, and what I've done is I've placed a circle, I've lined it up and scaled it perfectly, and I've put a line in here underneath to denote where I would consider the water level to be. And I think that's pretty accurate. You know, if you look at this and you can understand what you're looking at, you can pretty much determine there's the wheel, there's the pier right underneath it, and right beneath that is the water. Now then, if we assume that Kevin Jackson was around about 6 meters above the water at the time, we can determine that if we put this line in here, we can determine that eye level or horizontal, because there's obviously a lot of talk going on currently about what is eye level and horizontal, but horizontal above the same water that's all connected, you know, this water here that's connected to this water, where this water would come in round here, this water is all connected. If you go to Google Earth, you can see that it's all connected. This water here that Kevin Jackson, the water's receded when he took the photography, but the water is still all connected to the pier, which is down here. And there you can see the big wheel. There's the big wheel. Look. Okay, so this water, it's all connected. And if you believe that water is flat and level and horizontal and all that, then all of this water, if you're 6 meters above the water here, and you know where 6 meters above the water is here, because you can see it, and you're on a flat plane, then you will have a line of sight, a horizontal line between point A and point B. Dead easy to figure out, dead easy to understand. Let's go back to the photography. So yes, so now we're here back at the photography, and you can see that the wheel is here. There's the wheel, there's the water level right beneath. So if he's at 6 meters, you can, I don't know, put yourself here, let's say. Let's just say there for argument's sake. And I'm not too fussed. It really doesn't make an awful lot of difference, to be fair. So I can put myself there if you want. I could, if he was at 12 meters, let's put him at 12 meters. Let's put it there. If he was at 20 meters, let's put him there. I don't care where you want to put him. Kevin Jackson gave his location. And if we go to Google Earth and we actually hover over his exact location, it will give you an elevation above mean sea level. And the elevation above mean sea level right here is 6 meters. He was obviously holding the camera in his hand when he took the photograph, and the tide was at low tide at the time. So it's my assumption that he was somewhere between 10 and 12 meters, but it really doesn't matter, because all we're going to be looking at here is the relationship on a flat plane. We're not interested in whether or not it's a globe. We're only interested in whether or not it's a flat plane or not. Now then, I don't care if you want to put the water line down here. If you want to put it down there, that's entirely up to you. And then if you want to then say that his elevation is here, or here, or here, it makes no difference. This is just eye level across the water. That's all we're trying to determine here. And by doing so, we'll be able to tell what is happening with those mountains behind. Okay, so if you understand that and that principle, we can move forward. Now, just to let you guys know that this wasn't a one-off photograph, we are going to look at some other photography that Bev actually took. And here we have a photograph which Bev took, this bottom image here, this is, or Bev's son took, whichever. He went to the same spot and he essentially recreated the image of Blackpool with the mountains in relation to the tower. There's a tiny bit of parallax, but that's because he was maybe only 30 or 40 meters left of the actual location that Kevin Jackson took the photograph from. But we can actually see that the mountain here in relation to the tower is the same height in the relation to the tower there. So we're absolutely sure that we're looking at the same mountains. You can see the same trough. You can see the same trough. And this isn't an isolated image. This image has been noted by Bev to be the default position from this spot. In other words, these mountains always look like that from this spot because this is where he does his photography. Much like I did my photography along the Fylde coast from the Mirrorball all the way up to Fleetwood, he does his photography from Southport. So he's telling me, as an expert from his location, that this is the default position. These mountains are always in the same spot. So here we have a map. And this map is of the mountains that we're trying to see. And we have Dow Crag and the Old Man of Coniston here. These are the two mountains that we're going to be trying to analyze here, right? There's the trough. There's the two mountains. And let's go back to the photography. There's the trough. There's the two mountains. There's the trough. There's the two mountains. There's the trough. Right. So we definitely know that we're looking at this over here. There we go. The trough, the two mountains. Here is the water. This is the water down here. We also have some villages down here, some little towns right on the coast. And this entire height is 803 meters. So, Old Man of Coniston, 803 meters high. So what we're going to do is we are going to crop out this area here, this area. And we're going to crop it down to where I would consider is eye line. Now, if you want to go over here to where I put all these eye line images in, that's great. And if we say that this location is the absolute bottom, we'll take it from there. So come over here and we're going to crop out this area here. That's all we're interested in. We're going to crop it out to there and we're going to line it up. And here we have the cropped part that I've just taken, and we're going to line it up with the map. And here we have Dow Crag, here we have the Old Man of Coniston, 803 meters in elevation above the water down here, bearing in mind the water that connects everything. Now then, obviously this is the saddle in between. You can see that this matches up pretty damn well, I have to say. And if we check this out, let me put a line in so that you guys know that there's no cheating going on here. There's the top of Dow Crag. There's the top of the Old Man of Coniston over here. Can you see how that all lines up absolutely perfectly? Absolutely perfectly. Right. So now that we know that this is in the correct scale, all we have to do is just raise it up to the same height. That's all we have to do. Raise it up to the same height, essentially about here. And let's see. And what you can determine here is that there is a massive amount of this mountain missing. A massive amount. This is 803 meters above the water. Above the water. We have towns and villages down here. And we have all of this land, this going higher and higher and higher. All this extra land here that is below Blackpool. Below what I would say is eye level across the same water. So let's go back to Google Earth. Point 1, water connects. Point 2, water with the wheel connects. Point 3, water to the mountains over here in the distance. So all this area here from point 3 down to the water's edge is what we're seeing in that image. And here's the water. And this water is the same water that I'm filming across. The same water here. So all of this land going all the way up to the top brings you all the way down to the body of water that connects points 1, 2, and 3. But we are definitely seeing that there's a drop here. 100%. If I put a line in here, you'll see. Let's put this line in just so that you know. There we go. Half of the mountain is missing. We're close to 400 meters. If you want to argue, I'll go as low as 350 meters if you want. It makes no difference. All of this land here, all the way down to the water, is below Blackpool. So I've just done a little diagram here to try and show you what's going on. And obviously we have point 1 over on the right, point 2 to denote where Blackpool Tower is, and point 3 to denote where the mountains are. Now, I know that this is not to scale. It's not designed to be to scale, right? So let's get that out of the way right now. This is not to scale, so nobody come back at me at this. But this is just a demonstration to show you what is going on. So from point 1, if Kevin Jackson was at 6 meters, 8 meters, 10 meters, 12 meters, 20 meters, it didn't really matter across a flat plane, because we are able to, by means of the wheel, the big wheel on Central Pier, determine exactly where horizontal would be in relation to the water. Because we know that there's water connecting points 1, 2, and 3, and if water is level, and we can determine where 8 meters, 10 meters, 12 meters is at point 2, we can also determine what happened in the image. Right, so if we're looking from point 1 to point 2 and we have a horizontal across the water, we can then look at point 3 and say that, okay, in order to assume we're on a flat plane, we will see all of this of the mountain. That's what we will see. We'll be able to determine that. We'll be able to see it in the imagery, which means that when we look at this photography over here, actually, we should have been able to see all of this, all of that area there, right down to about here, right down to about there. We should have seen all of that, but we don't. This is the mountain, and this is what we actually see in the imagery. We actually see this. This is what we actually see right down here. And that is evidenced here. So from a side-on view, which I know we don't see because it's not the side of our own head that we see in an image, but we can use images like this to demonstrate things. So what we can demonstrate is that with this straight line, going from point 1 here, straight line, through point 2, all the way over to point 3, what we're actually seeing is half the mountain is missing. It's lower than horizontal, lower across this water here that connects all 3, 1, 2, and 3. It connects it all, and yet half the mountain is missing. As you can see here, half of it is gone. There's the trough. There's the other part of the trough. Over on this side, there's the trough. There's the other part of the other trough, like so. There's the obstruction of Blackpool, obstructing your view of the rest of the mountain. But you know that your water level is telling you that this red line here is the height above the water. It's the height above the water of the mountain on a flat plane. It's the height above the water at Blackpool. So on a flat plane, you should have seen all of this down here. There's the water line here. There's the actual water line down here. My research when I came down to look at Barrow-in-Furness from Blackpool or from Ankersholme, and I was seeing observations like this, and I was seeing shore to shore, right down to the shoreline, right down to the shoreline. I've been to this location. I know exactly where it is. We are seeing shore to shore right here. But this water that I'm looking across here, it's actually curving. That's what's actually happening. So in my mind, even though I thought I was seeing a flat plane, well, what I was actually seeing was refraction. This is all being refracted. It has to be. There can be no other explanation, because this area between point 2 and point 3 is curving, it's dropping, it's going away. And that means that every observation I took from that spot proved, beyond a shadow of a doubt, that the water was curved. I just didn't want to believe it. Here's another observation, here's another comparison I did. Inferior mirage on the right-hand side, very clear image on the left-hand side. I always would throw it back to the globe earthers. This is a beautiful image. It shows far more than you should see on a globe, even with refraction. And this water that actually goes in here, this is water that goes down here, and these are buildings on the coastline of Barrow. That shouldn't be seen on a globe. But as I've just demonstrated with the 1, 2, 3 principle, between point 2, 3, which is what I'm looking at, when you look at it from point 1, we're actually seeing that it's dropped, which means that this image here that I'm looking at, when seeing far further than I should do on a globe and apparently seeing flat, is actually being refracted. Here's another image of compression. You know, I was the first person to talk about it. Here we have a photograph of the Stena Line boat, which is being compressed. But you only get this compression over water, and you have to see the water to get the compression. This is the 1 foot observation, and this is the beautiful 1 foot observation where we're seeing land way over in the distance here. We're seeing shore to shore over here. Sure, we've got a little bit of miraging going on up here, but that wasn't talked about much. We would focus on the fact that we're seeing all the way to Barrow in Furness over here, all the way to the town hall. This is what I would be talking about, these shore-to-shore observations. But this water, it's actually curving. And what we're looking at here is refraction. And we know that because from where I took it, this image, point 2 to point 3, these mountain ranges in the distance over here, these mountain ranges are dropping in relation to where I am. That can only happen on a globe. So how does this all work with the black swan image? Well, it's very simple, really. Everything that I was filming was being refracted. When I went down very low, I was able to see essentially shore to shore. That meant that the horizon was artificially extended. So if it was artificially extending for me, then it's quite clear that all we're seeing in the black swan image is refraction. The horizon is artificially extended, much as the horizon was artificially extended for me in my photography. This is another image that I took when I was down at 1 foot, and we're actually seeing a boat returning to Heysham. You can actually see the part of the boat that sticks out at the front to break the water, and obviously we're seeing a boat in the foreground and a couple of guys in focus. And obviously this boat is a long, long way away. But how far away is it? Well, let's have a look. I was looking all the way over here at the boat returning to Heysham. Now then, the distance is obviously where it takes its line. You can see that these are the shallows here. They have to take a certain route to go into Heysham, and this is the route that they would take. And along this line of path here, we're looking at around 12 to 12.3 miles, around that sort of distance. Now let's look back at the image. Look how beautiful this is. This boat is at least 12 miles away, and yet we're seeing all of the boat from 1 foot. All of the boat from just 1 foot. Look how much the water goes right up to the boat. Look how this boat in the foreground, which is obviously nearer to give some perspective, is showing that the horizon is substantially further than it should be on a globe. This water is being loomed up. How do we know that? It's being refracted around Earth curvature. We know that because from point 1, looking at point 2 and 3, and looking between points 2 and 3, which is where I'm filming from, has dropped. So this location has to have curvature, which means that the reason we're able to see this boat at this distance, 12 miles away, with extended water right up to it, right up to 12 miles away, this water line right up to 12 miles away is visible because it's going around a curve. Now let's look back at the Black Swan image, and what we see is that platform habitat is 9.4 miles away. Platform hill house is 6.21 miles away. My image, which is far clearer, far nicer, far better, which has the water clearly far more visible beyond the 9.41 miles away. This had to be highlighted to actually and contrasted to bring up that contrast to show you the horizon beyond platform habitat. And that is not as clear as my photography. Yet I'm able to demonstrate with my photography that it's curvature that we're looking over and it's refraction. This is only 9.4 miles away. My image shows the horizon right up to the boat, 12 miles away, but it's over a curve. The Black Swan is nothing but refraction. That's all it is. It's only refraction. This proves it. This demonstrates what's going on. The Blackpool image that turned me from flat earther to globe earther, I understood it. And this is the reason. All those times that I went down to the beach and saw this type of photography, I saw 12 miles, 15 miles, 18 miles. I once went as far as 24 miles and saw shore to shore. That's what convinced me that we lived on a flat plane with flat water. Flat water equals a flat earth. But the new evidence that came out recently that showed that from my location to the location behind this boat is actually dropping is what convinced me that the Earth is a globe. There can be no other explanation. The drop on those mountains prove beyond a shadow of a doubt that this image that we're looking at here is refracted around the curvature of Earth. It proves that the water that connects the three locations, point 1, 2, and 3, is curved. And this is footage of me from the exact spot where Kevin Jackson actually took the photograph. This little mound that's just off the trail is exactly where he said that he'd taken the photograph. I went and I took video footage of the same spot, and I'm going to show you that video footage right now. Now, what's interesting about this is, as that I zoom in, I'm going to pause it in a moment just so that you can see. The water is now coming in to that location. The water is now starting to fill up this area down here. For where I'm filming, this water is starting to come back in. You can see that clear as day in the photography. And something else that happened when I took the photography was I was able to dispel the notion that you're seeing all the way down to the floor here across a flat plane in the original photography from Kevin Jackson. And we can demonstrate that by looking at the actual water coming in. And you can see from over here, you can see the water piling in, coming across, and you can still see the water there. And we could determine that the water is coming in to that spot right here. And if we was to actually place that in a similar location to Kevin Jackson's photography, you will determine again that it's around about here. And I'm not going to be so precise with that, so please don't take that as an absolute gospel position, but it's not far off. And all this other location right here would normally be filled with water as the tide comes in and pushes out. And the only reason we were able to see this land down here was because the water receded out of the way, in effect lowering what you can actually see of Blackpool. And one last thing, over on this left hand side, we can actually see the water coming in right here, and we know that this is the tram stop here. This is the tram stop building. These are the little Stonehenge things that Conspiracy Cats put out on his video, and you can see them here. But look how much they are under the water, like so. So as a final nail in the coffin, I do believe that going back to that location again demonstrated that the water is indeed curving as per you would expect with gravity at 8 inches per mile squared. And at this distance, this amount of missing that you would expect to see on the tram stop over here is exactly proportional to what we are actually seeing with the water coming in and filling in this spot here, which doesn't have any water in currently. And I think that sums everything up, really. I think I've gone through everything. I've been through my credentials as a flat earth researcher. I've gone through the credentials of me understanding everything from compression to the limited angle to perspective. I was doing this long before these guys even got stuck into it. I have more data than any other flat earth researcher out there. I did the time, I put the legwork in. I have photography that beats this black swan image, photography that destroys this image, because I can see far, far further with water extending right up to a boat far beyond the platform habitat. This image that I'm going to show you right now is proof of that. This boat is at least 12 miles away. But I've also been able to demonstrate that the location that I was filming in has drop. How was I able to do that? Quite easily. I was able to get an image of Blackpool that was recreated by another researcher that shows beyond a shadow of a doubt that half of this mountain is missing. And this is just the visuals. We haven't even looked at the trigonometry or the pixel count that Ruhif did. Please go and check out the video on the Conspiracy Cats channel for that breakdown. This is just the visuals. This is what I did. This was my research, visuals of what we can see and what we can determine. This mountain isn't compressed. There's no compression. There's no sinking going on. There's none of the effects that I documented, put out to the flat earth research community. The person that actually started all of this research, myself, when I was going out doing all of this, I applied all of those skills to try and determine what was going on with this image on a flat plane. And I wasn't able to do it. The only conclusion is that from point 2, the tower here, to point 3, the mountains here, was drop. That's the only conclusion that was left. And if we go to Google Earth and we look between point 2 over here and point 3 over here, which is where I was doing my photography across this water here, this proves if there's drop between point 2 and point 3, then there had to have been curvature that I was seeing over. It had to be refraction. This image that I'm showing you now had to be refraction. This boat that was 12 miles away had to be refraction. This photograph that was also repeated by Bev's son and published by Bev proves that this is indeed the default position from point 1. When you look at point 2 and 3, there is absolutely drop. If there's drop there, the water's dropping. If the water's dropping, it's not dropping on a flat plane, it's curving around a globe. And that is the utter destruction of the black swan argument. And it is absolute proof of refraction, 100%. I can't think of anybody else that's been able to prove beyond a shadow of a doubt refraction. But I do believe that the body of research that I did over the years, which shows these incredible footages from shore to shore, and yet we have this demonstrable proof which clearly shows drop, clearly shows it, proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that this is refraction that you are seeing in this image. 100%. And I really think that that is the final nail in the coffin. There's no coming back from this. Bye-bye ball? I don't think so. It's bye-bye flat. And I'll see you all in the next one.